Well, here we are, the last assignment for the class. This was the best I could do in terms of party hats, and I'm going to roll with it. All right. So here is the title of my critical literature review. It focuses on feedback, both provided by teachers and between peers. My own personal background, what led me to teaching, actually. Grew up in the western suburbs of Minneapolis with my parents and my three older brothers. Went to Minnetonka High School, then went to St. Olaf College. When I was there, my junior and senior year on-campus work was to tutor physics. I primarily did this because I didn't want to work in the cafeteria anymore. But as I did this is what led me to wanting to teach. So less than a year out of St. Olaf, I enrolled in the weekend college program at Augsburg College, which is now Augsburg University, and went and got my license. My first year teaching, which was at Minnetonka, was actually before I had my license. It was a long-term sub-position that I didn't even apply for. I got contacted 10 days before the first day of class, but I would be kind of dumb not to have jumped on the opportunity. Got done with that year, finished off the licensure, came back to Minnetonka for a year. The next year, didn't have a job, but in the spring, got a one-semester long-term sub at Champlain Park. And that fall, I found my forever home. It's like I was an adopted puppy at Lakeville North. This will be my 18th year there, and I don't see a reason to leave. So, how did I arrive at my topic? I think back to what my first few years were like teaching, and they were heavy on lectures. It was very teacher-centered. And it wasn't a matter that I didn't want to relinquish power. I just didn't know how to organize students to be able to provide useful feedback to each other. But along comes some experience. You end up having some better understanding of effective feedback methods, and that's what led me to this topic for the literature review, centering on feedback. Because I'd been doing it, but it was kind of by trial and error. Not kind of, it was very much by trial and error. And there are all sorts of questions that are associated with that. But I end up wanting to be able to help with potentially my current colleagues a little bit, though that's less likely to occur, but more with new teachers. We've got a new guy starting just this fall. He's less than half my age, which is really weird because now I'm supposedly the person providing guidance, and I have no idea how the hell I became the expert. It just, when did it happen? So, my goals for the literature review. I wanted to produce a document that I could use as a reference. That ended up making the literature review a bit long because I included a lot of detail that I don't think traditionally would be included. But I didn't want to have to go and look up anything anywhere else. I wanted it in this one document that was pretty easily referenceable by the table of contents. So that was the big thing. Wanted to look at techniques that weren't just coming to me trial and error, but were supported by data. Share this with the guy with whom I teach physics at North. Again, new teachers in the science department, and maybe even the the faculty as a whole. So the central question, it's a mouthful. It centers around what's the best methods of feedback. That's really what it is, but it's detailed. And I had two primary sub-questions, one about breaking larger assignments into smaller bits, and I'll talk about how feedback is associated with that. But the primary part of it was just investigating different peer interactions. I had a little bit about teacher feedback, but I ended up focusing more on peer-to-peer feedback. So I had 8 things that I really took away from the literature review. The first one may seem obvious. You take a big assignment, you break it into bits, that's going to be helpful. But, sounds familiar, doesn't it? But you have to have feedback, not only from your instructors, but from your peers. Those are both shown to be very effective. That feedback needs to employ high and low levels of thinking. I'll give a brief example of what that means for a physics class in a couple minutes. This was the most interesting one. The end result was that overall it's more useful when someone is providing rather than receiving feedback. There are, of course, some associated details, but the having to think about explanations, having to think about suggestions, that was the biggest thing. And receiving did help somewhat, but it was the issuing feedback to others was shown to have the greatest effect. This is one that probably makes a lot of sense, is that you can't just point out mistakes, but you have to offer explanations and suggestions. Another interesting one was that if someone needs to work on something, having a documented plan to work on things, to make revisions, actually had a noticeable effect on whether or not a student actually made those changes. In the right setting, peer feedback was seen to be just as effective as teacher feedback. Need a little guidance instruction from the teacher, but this is really great news. The second to last one I found was not really related to peers, but I thought it was a good reminder, and it popped up in the articles, was that if you're presenting new information, you have or if you're presenting information kids already know, you have to really make sure that they're listening to new information rather than just tuning you out and going off of what they think they already know, which happens in my class from time to time. Finally, larger group settings, like an entire class, it's a little daunting to conduct these things. I haven't often, but they have been shown to be effective. A teacher just needs to take the time to develop some structure and to interject. They need to be an active part of this thing. So, how do I think I'm going to apply this? I had 4 main areas that I was intending to research for the literature review. The first was related to the title about feedback techniques. I already had students working in small groups before, but it was pretty unstructured. So I need to assign groups. This doesn't necessarily take very long, but it's a step I can't skip anymore. And then I need to have them follow, especially at the beginning of the year, as a way to just get used to how to do this, some pretty specific steps. And I was, excuse me, I was even thinking I would have a document, maybe get it laminated, nothing that they would necessarily have to fill out, just with instructions. So the first would offer a reminder of how to offer good critique, not just pointing out mistakes. Involves the high and low level thinking, offering suggestions and explanations. So low level thinking in a physics course would be how to physically organize, work on paper, making sure you're doing your algebra correct. Whereas high level thinking would actually involve the problem solving and a lot more explanation of phenomenon, picking an equation apart to see what each bit actually means, interpreting and producing graphs. And then finally, this is a part that I would probably have them fill out electronically and submit to me, was that since there's no way we could cover every question, every problem that a student is going to be looking at, I would have them submit a plan for how they are going to proceed to address the things they don't know with the problems we didn't talk about. I had 3 other goals for the literature review, but in making it detailed, I ignored them. They just got dropped because 49 pages was enough. And the feedback was really what I was interested in. I thought these were maybe sort of interesting side questions. So, what did I do with the last 16 weeks? During peer-to-peer feedback, I need to be more actively engaged. It is very tempting to say, okay, here's 10 minutes, work on a problem. And it actually is reasonably effective, especially for my AP classes, to just say, all right, talk to each other about these problems. And there is a value to that in them having to figure out the best process. But maybe that comes a little later in the year. So I need to really get in there. I need to circulate, even though it's so tempting to get some grading done. Because in 10 minutes, you can get tons of stuff done. This will, especially at first, undoubtedly create more time that you have to put into it. But experience and a little bit of thinking might lead to some new ideas on how to have this not take so much extra time. Again, I want to be able to use this literature review as a reference tool that I can pick and choose from, like for one day if I really want to. Maybe even getting into a little bit of research, which typically we don't have time for big research in these classes. Maybe just as much as instructing them on how to read a research article, and just as an exercise. So, this course had its challenges. They were manageable, and we were assisted by you, Scott. So, the takeaways. You have to be willing to research things that you hear, and don't just look for that confirmational bias. Learn definitely how to more accurately, better find reputable sources and how to actually read a dense research paper. This is something that I don't know how often I'll necessarily need to do this in my class, but you never know. It's a good tool to have in the toolbox, so to speak. And you have to give yourself some willingness to enjoy just going down a rabbit hole that you weren't anticipating. In terms of the writing process, time. You gotta give yourself time, because you're gonna get frustrated. You need time to walk away. You need time to think about it and wander and mutter as you're staring at your feet. And you need time to sit back and enjoy when you've made some good progress. You need to take feedback seriously. You have to set deadlines along the way. We fortunately had them set for us, very valuable. Got to be willing to revise, take your ego out of it, view your work dispassionately. So, on that note, thank you for your time, and little physics lesson right here. Bye-bye.